It's Tiffany Williams with TJ Marie Consulting. I am so happy to bring to you in this second interview with Breakfast at Tiffany's, a very dear friend of mine and fellow fundraising colleague. She is a magnificent person, but she's also a magnificent fundraiser. And so I'm super excited to share our conversation with you all. Her name is Alicia Rankin, and she is the Director of Development at Chicago Scholars, which is a Chicagoland organization that helps prepare students for life after high school. So Alicia, thank you so much for joining us today. Alicia and I are both FAMUans. We went to school together. Yes, shout out to Rattlers. And we're just super excited to engage in this conversation. And as you know, this is just going to be a pretty organic conversation about fundraising. I've got some questions to ask Alicia, and I know she's going to be able to share some really great information with us. So without further ado, Alicia, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'll just ask you to add anything you like the audience to know about you, and just tell us a little bit about your journey to here, because I know you didn't start out as a fundraiser. So give us some information.
I did not. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to the conversation. I really appreciate it. I guess a little bit about me. I'm a mom. I am a proud native of the South Side of Chicago. As you've been, I'm a strong advocate for HBCUs, for historically Black colleges. It's very near and dear to my heart. And I guess a little bit about, one other thing, I'm a writer, both technical and creative. And so that takes up a lot of my time, both like professionally and extracurricularly. But I guess how I ended up here, I don't know if there is a traditional route into development, first of all, but
true.
I started my development career with a programs background and consulting experience. And so I found myself on the, extracurricularly, again, kind of lending my time and talents to helping organizations that I was volunteering with, develop fundraising plans or strategies to, do outreach, also planning different events and galas and things like that for, again, organizations that I was involved with. And when I made the intentional decision to switch to development work, it was something that I kind of knew that I wanted to do. I will say in college, I didn't know anything about development. I didn't know that you could actually have a career as a fundraiser or a development professional. I majored in business, both undergrad and grad. And I knew that I had a knack for relationships. I knew I had a certain, knack for, the business environment. And so I started in consulting. I moved to higher ed as an internal consultant. But again, kind of knowing that this resource piece and this relationship was like this relationship development was my superpower. So I was really lucky and fortunate and blessed to find Chicago Scholars and begin my development career there as well. I've been in development for like three and a half years now. And this is where I fit, this ability to be able to connect dots and bring in resources and this idea of storytelling. And as I mentioned, I'm a writer. And so being able to use some of my creative talents, I find it's all a really good blend for development and fundraising.
It absolutely is. And we cannot wait until you finish and publish your book.
Working on it. Thank you. I love the push.
Let's begin there. But you know what? You said something that was, so critical. And I'm going to quote you on my social media for this one, because it's a great quote. Relationships is my superpower. Like that really is just a pivotal, crucial piece in the work that we do, right? Developing relationships with people. People give to people, right? Who are, creating this impact in their nonprofits. And so I love that you call relationships your superpower. The other thing that really kind of struck me is, your storytelling background, right? So we present, like this case for support, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in the conversation, this idea of being able to tell a story that connects the reader or the person that you're talking to, the audience, with the organization's mission is the work of fundraising and development, right? So thank you for mentioning both of those things. So tell me a little bit about Chicago Scholars, and tell me about, your role and how you really kind of imagine philanthropy propelling the mission of the organization. Like, why is it so important?
So Chicago Scholars is a phenomenal organization. I'm so fortunate to find them because their mission aligns very closely with my own personal mission. Chicago Scholars is a leadership development organization that empowers academically ambitious first generation students from low income communities who are the first in their family to go to college or the first to graduate. They're the first to really set out, this trajectory into their careers and professional life. And we help them by providing them with mentoring, counseling, and a host of other supports along these critical transitions to and through college, but ultimately supporting them to make sure they land in a career place that is a good match and fit for them when they graduate. And our expectation is absolutely that they will come back to this community and become the leaders that ultimately change the face of Chicago.
Yeah, that's so important. There are a lot of organizations that boast kind of like, high school graduation or even like high college admission. And those things are important, absolutely. But your organization really kind of picks up the mantle and takes it further because you make sure that, not just that the students are in college, but that they can successfully matriculate, right? And that they can be placed in careers that will propel, the rest of their lives essentially in their community. So I think that's so important to connect those things. So can we provide a stellar academic education? And then how do we kind of pass the torch on to, make sure that those students can then retain or remain in school and graduate. Yeah. So your mission is absolutely important. And tell us a little bit about how philanthropy kind of helps you do that work.
Right. So what's the saying? No money, no mission. On one hand, everything that we do is from the generosity of our donors. And when you think about philanthropy and, the scope of it, it's time, it's talent, it's treasure, it's testimony, it's all of those things. And our organization as a whole is heavily built upon our partnerships, our stakeholders who are the inputs, key inputs to our organization. We have volunteers and mentors and some counselors who are giving of their time to help our students make sure they find, on their college going journey, make sure they find the right match fit school for them. Our donors, our corporate partners are providing internships to make sure that these students have the experience. So when they graduate, they land in a job and a company that will allow them to thrive. And so of the time, talent, treasure, I feel like testimony is one that's kind of often undervalued. Back to this idea of storytelling. We were talking a little bit about word of mouth earlier, and you never know the impact that you sharing a story about something or a student that you met or somewhere that you volunteered. You don't know the impact that it'll have on that next person. You have no clue what resources are available to them. And oftentimes we find it's that the power of storytelling, the power of that testimony that really helps us propel our mission, that helps us bring more people into our fold and ultimately more resources for our scholars, which is the purpose of it all.
Absolutely. Very, very insightful. Thank you so much for that answer. So let's talk a little bit about just our profession. And, obviously this is just like a crazy, crazy time in every sector, right? Like just generally and professionally, personally, right now, Chicago is like under a blanket of snow, Texas is, really going through it. So like, this is almost a surreal, like unimaginable time. But, in light of everything, the political climate, the social justice unrest, and a renewed focus on issues of social justice. Tell us a little bit about what you would say is kind of like the biggest challenge in philanthropy or fundraising right
I guess to expound on the impacts of COVID, right? I think right now there's like this need and a desire to do more with less, right?
now.
Needs are greater, right? At Chicago Scholars, for example, you have scholars when everything went down, right? They were at college campuses across the country with no way to get home. So needs are greater. Also, I think everybody's just exhausted, right? Which makes raising money harder, right? Everybody's exhausted mentally, physically, financially, emotionally, all of the above. And so it can make fundraising harder right now. Chicago Scholars, and I think, or most of us, we are being tasked with doing more, meeting greater needs with fewer resources. And Chicago Scholars was not excused from that in terms of the hit that our revenues have taken ultimately. And so really fundraising in that space has been challenging. I would say that I am optimistic
Good. Okay.
about, I would say that I'm optimistic about the mutually beneficial relationships that we are able to develop as a result of all of the unrest, right? So education is social justice. And so finding those partners where we can do more with less because our values align, because our objectives align, that's where we're able to see bigger impact when we can find those partnerships where where we really want to move forward together. Chicago Scholars has a what we call READY framework. It's our version of DEI, which is racial justice, equity, accessibility, diversity, and inclusion. And it's a framework that really helps us assess ourselves, our policies, our practices, our recruitment, our partners. And so when we layer that into our work, we're able to find those people and those organizations that really have those shared values. And so when we combine, the impact is greater. And so that is where I'm hopeful. I think that another challenge to that is that we know that development is often a long game, right? So we're developing these new relationships with these companies, these corporations that have made these commitments. But what would have taken a few touch points maybe is taking more or longer because everything is just different. And
Yeah.
so it's a little bit of a game. But in the meantime, we are sticking to what we know are the greatest levers to impact our scholars and their outcomes. And then, just working hard, right? Working hard to help really
Yeah.
bring in those people and those resources in the space of right now and the challenges that all nonprofits are essentially facing with
Yeah.
COVID and everything else, the
Yeah.
social unrest. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you're optimistic about it, and then also being like a realist about what people are experiencing and people are feeling right now. I've spoken with so many nonprofit leaders, so like fundraisers, executive directors, who are just kind of like scrambling to do things as they've always been done, but we are just living in such an unprecedented reality right now. And so like you gotta kind of understand the reality of it, but then also, temper that with, being optimistic as well about the future, and understanding that, your mission is important enough to keep going, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that you mentioned was when you talk about like your partnerships is, partnering with organizations, companies, foundations that have shared values. And two things really kind of stuck out with me there. One, the idea that the organization itself can readily articulate its values, right? And like understands what they are. And I mean, you described it perfectly. And an example is your ready framework, right? So like you can very clearly say like this is where we find value, or these are our values, this is what we stand for. And a lot of organizations would be served well by having those conversations, because it's only when you understand your own values that you can then seek out organizations whose missions align with yours, and who with whom you share values, right? right? So I think that's so important, you know, especially in a place like Chicago, where there's like huge companies. And so we start talking about like major gifts. It's like, well, that company over there has a lot of money and this foundation here has a lot of money, or, you know, and it's like, it's not enough to just have the capacity. Like there has to be a shared affinity,
Right.
right? So developing that is just such
Yeah.
a critical piece. I'm glad you mentioned it here. So tell
Yeah,
me.
I was gonna
Okay.
add to that, like
Yeah.
part of in terms of our work, you know, I think, and why it's important to define those values for yourself. You know, part of our work, our mission, our vision is to ensure that ours, like this talent that we know exists, can go into places and thrive, that they can go into places and contribute. And so if we are asking that of others, we have to do it for ourselves and we have to do it first. And so we also want to be the company that will retain and utilize the talents of this underutilized, underserved population as well. And so it only helps, you know, in terms of being able to go out and tell your story, you need to have that information in terms of finding, you know, almost every grant application now is requiring you to comment what is your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so you
Yeah.
need to have those answers and not just make it up. And the other thing I would add to what you said earlier in terms of just the harsh realities of where we are with fundraising is that funders also want you to be honest. I think sometimes we're afraid to just kind of really articulate where we are, what challenges we're having, be they financial or something otherwise. But that's when you get what you need, right? Is
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
can be honest about where you are. Yeah.
Absolutely. And being honest about where you are. I mean, you got a lot of quotes here. No, 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 it's taken some of my, but that's so important because I have seen where organizations try to like, oh, we're committed to diversity because we've got this, you know, person of color that exists in this obscure, you know, role. And like, we just hired them 1 month ago. Like, listen, get honest with yourself about where the organization is and understand why it's important, you know, and obviously, you know, important to funders, but like, you know, this is like a part of like, you know, the pandering that we see happening, not just in nonprofit sector, but also in the corporate sector, right?
Yep.
So again, I'm glad you mentioned it. Absolutely. All right. So Alicia, tell me what we're talking about affinities and making sure that, you know, values are aligned. What are your personal affinities? What organizations or what, you know, types of organizations as a fundraiser who has like, you know, an acute sense of these things, you
Mhm.
know, what type of organizations do you invest in and why?
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, it's usually people give to people. People also give to things that have had an impact on them somewhere in their life's journey. And, you know, I was a first generation college student as well. And I made it, but I don't know. I don't know how I made it, right? But my college experience utterly and completely changed, heavily influenced me and who I am. So when I was in college, I knew two things. I knew that I was going to lend my talents and my time to higher education in some capacity and in some way. And I knew that I was going to give back to United Negro College Fund. So I was a UNCF recipient of scholarships and internships. And so, you know, looking back now, I know, well, I don't know the impact that the absence of those things would have had, but I know the impact and the influence that they provided for me. And so I knew that I was going to give back to UNCF. I knew that I was going to scream from the high heavens about the importance and the value of HBCUs. So I knew that that was going to be a case. In terms of how I lend my times and talents, might be a little plug here, right? But you know, so our alma mater at FAMU, each class basically does a fundraising competition with the previous year's classes. I'm working with a small group of classmates that all came in the same year that started at FAMU to raise $287,000 because
Whew.
we must beat our the last year's class.
I just want to say before you go on, this started with the class of 2002. The class of 2002 started it all. So I just want to say, you know, shout out to us.
When one wins, we all win, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
See how come we're very competitive, right? And so we must now raise $287,000 for our class to donate back to FAMU at Homecoming this October. So I'm developing strategies and all sorts of different campaigns and things to really help us do that. So that's a little bit more of a short-term affinity there in terms of this goal for this year, but long-term, I welcome all conversations with folks who want to really have a national conversation around fundraising for HBCUs. I utterly believe they are one of the most underutilized tools that we have to really progress our community, and it would be hard to convince me otherwise. So
absolutely. You and I have had these conversations,
yes,
right? We've
yes.
had these conversations about how important HBCUs are and how important fundraising for HBCUs and funding for HBCUs is. And so this is the last time we had this conversation was pre-COVID, and then like pre-Kamala Harris. And so now there's been like so many conversations happening and pre the Mackenzie Scott gifts, right? So there's been like so much conversation happening about HBCUs, and it's just so amazing how people are like, oh, we didn't know HBCUs exist. And I'm like, we've been here, like we have been doing this work, And so I'm on one hand, I'm very glad the conversations are happening. On the other hand, it is like a stark reality, and like
it's amazing. But you know what? It's the same notion with, not to bring it back to Chicago Scholars. It's like there's talent everywhere.
Yes.
There's talent everywhere. And people given opportunities, you would be surprised. And I guess my goal is to get to a place where there is no astonishment and amazement about that, but they're just abundant opportunities.
Yes. So when you hear executives say, oh, we can't find any Black talent, it makes your skin crawl. So yes,
Let me help you. Let me help you.
We point you in the direction of Tallahassee and Atlanta and Jackson and all of these great places that are turning out these really amazing scholars who are ready to, do the work. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. Of course, HBCUs are near and dear to my heart as well. So we'll continue this conversation, girl, next time we can get back together over, grilled cheese sandwiches downtown. All right. So Alicia, tell me, a lot of people have been trying to find some balance with, making sure that they are taking care of themselves in this crazy time. And then also like maintaining their work responsibilities. And like, tell us, how do you keep your team enthused and maintain that optimism that you spoke about earlier in this time where it's just, I just want to go get in the bed and pull the covers over me
right, take a nap, a midday nap,
turn on the electric blanket and just that's what I want to do. So how are you not doing that?
So I think as I transitioned through different industries, if you will, I got really clear about things that really mattered to me, and that was being in a culture and an environment that we know how to meet our objectives and our bottom line, but there's also some caring and some nurturing along the way. And so again, when I say I am fortunate to have found Chicago Scholars, it has a culture like no place that I've heard of, definitely not have worked before. And I think, so I'll give you an example. One of the things that we have 4 learning weeks a year, one each quarter, and it's a time to like really pause and reflect and to get up on the balcony and really like look at the work and say, am I spending my time doing the right things? Is there a problem that I really want to address, but haven't had enough time to like really commit to it, to do some research and look at some data or develop a new strategy? And so we pause or drastically reduce the amount of meetings that we have that week. Development, we still kind of have to do what we need to do, but overall, the organization just kind of just pauses a little bit. That is more beneficial than I think people realize for morale, for, making sure you're not moving so fast, we're stumbling over ourselves, trying to keep up with things. one of our core values is we care for each other. And so there are lots of little things that we do along the way in terms of check-in, always soliciting and asking for feedback from staff of all levels. And, before we make decisions that could possibly impact your stress and your strain,
Yeah.
and your workload. And again, just being honest and making the decisions that can make life or things easier for people, and also just kind of knowing where it's like, this is going to be for this period, and at this time we're going to step back and do this. We've made decisions also to kind of take the workload. One of the decisions that we made was to really scale back a little bit on the number of students that we admit each year. That was a very difficult decision because a part of our last strategic plan was to scale and grow, but as this new strategic plan, it's really to deepen. And so we want to make sure that we can offer all of our supports in quality to all of our scholars. And so we had to pull back. And those are tough leadership decisions, but they definitely make it, in times like this, make it better, easier, more conducive for people to kind of, give it all. And we know in mission driven work, they'll just go and burn at both ends. But it's small things. I don't think it's anything major, right? It's sometimes just to check in and asking questions and being able and willing to listen to the answers and make the changes or adjustments along the way. And working from home does not hurt.
Yeah. There's that. So listen, I like all of that was amazing. And I think that the thing that probably, stuck out for me was that it all goes back to one of the first things you said when answering this question, is that we have a value that we care for each other.
Mhm.
Right. And so like from that stems all of these other things that go harken back to that. And the other part is that you had a strategic plan, which is great. I endorse.
Yes.
We're going to talk about strategic planning in another month, but it is. I always say, like, when we work with organizations to help them develop their strategic plan, it's like, okay, here's a blueprint, here's your plan. And this is a living document, right? It's not something you pack up and like put away until the next time
Back to
you're
see
getting
if you
ready.
check the
Exactly.
boxes later.
Right.
Yeah.
So you shared how, you had this plan, but that, environments and circumstances change. And so you were able to like go back to that plan and then, rework some things so that you could still accomplish the goals that you, want to accomplish, but there's already kind of a playbook, in order, right? And so I think that's so important. And then the last thing, and I'm going to steal this and I'm going to use it for another organization that's doing a strategic plan, so I think this is important, is that, we had a strategic plan to grow, and we have decided to have a plan that goes deeper, right?
Mhm.
So I a lot of times organizations are like, we serve 200, we want to serve 300 next
Right.
year, or we raise $1 million, we want to raise $1.5 million next year. And, it's about like the growth and the getting bigger and the getting larger. But that is such a delicate balance, because you want to also make sure that you're doing what you're doing well.
Yes.
Right. And so
Yes.
going deeper is, I would say, more important in a lot of circumstances and cases than, growing and getting
Yeah.
bigger. Right. So I'm
Mhm.
so glad you mentioned this.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the case for support. So the case for support is, what we're talking about on the blog this month, and, our other kind of videos will kind of reflect this idea of making sure that there's a case for support. It is one of the first questions I ask when I walk into a new client organization, or even in an introductory call. Like, anybody who's ever done an introductory call with TJ Marie Consulting will say, she asked us what was our case for support, because I always want to know. And I think it's just so critically important to have a standard written document, so everybody's on the same page about why you're raising the money, like, what is it going to, what is the impact, what has been the history. It's just so important. And I will say that most organizations, do not have a case for support. And they don't even think about a case for support unless they're getting ready to do like a big, major gift or
proposal.
capital campaign.
Mhm.
So share with us a little bit about how your organization uses the case for support, and why you think it is so important, because I know you do.
Yeah. So again, I think we've talked a lot about storytelling already, but it's also one of those things that you want to be ready. You want to be ready if someone approaches you and say, "Do you have any ideas that need to be funded, or why do you tell me something about your organization?" You want to be ready to, time is literally money in our world, and so you want to be ready. I think that it serves a lot of purposes. I do a lot of, not all, but I do a lot of the writing for Chicago Scholars and our organization, and so it's so beneficial, even in terms of having something standard to take and adapt and tweak or extract from when you need to customize something for a corporate proposal, or maybe a grant application. And one of the things that I've really loved seeing when I started Chicago Scholars and even to now is like looking back at those case for supports and seeing how the narrative has changed and how the organization has evolved. And it's important to be able to also relay that. So not only does it give you like a time, like, you know, uh, you get to see the trajectory of the organization, but it gives you those tools that you need every day to be ready to have those conversations and to be able to answer, who are we, why do we exist, what problems are we solving. I think it's really important to also have that language that staff can use to ensure that we're all talking about us and we're
Yes.
what we do the same way,
Right.
right? Having that consistency of message is really, really important.
Yes,
It's really important.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's perfect. That's exactly what I love to hear. Organizations that do well, people say like, okay, what are organizations doing? The ones that are doing it well, like what are some of those like fundamental practices that they have? And I always say, they have a case for support that everybody in the organization knows and understands. And whether or not they are frontline fundraisers or even a part of the development or fundraising apparatus at all, right? There is a culture of philanthropy. They understand why philanthropy is important. And it is because of leaders like you who are helping write the narrative and making sure everybody's on the same page in terms of messaging, making sure that everybody is conveying in the
Yeah.
same way, and it just makes it so much easier when there is kind of a standard document. And so kudos to you, kudos to your team and your colleagues who find that important and find it helpful. And then of course it's absolutely easier to write for grants. It is easier to create an end of the year impact statement or annual report. I mean, like it's just so much easier when the data is already there, and it's a staple of the organization to produce that information.
Yeah.
So,
One thing that I've noticed or that I've appreciated in some versus others is making sure we take like an asset or strengths based approach versus the deficit approach. I mean, I think we absolutely need to be able to convey the problems that we're trying to solve, and should we be successful, what will be alleviated, what will no longer. The deficit based language is not what you want to do. It's not what we want to do. It's not the tone. It's not the language. It's not the vibe that we're really that you want to give off.
yeah.
I would also say in terms of just like in the space of doing more with less, those systems, those structures, those documented processes, all of those things, and having a case, they all fall into the same realm of having those tools easily available to you so that you can do more with less time, so that you can do more with you, or the same, right? With less
Mhm.
resources. You want to
Yeah.
sometimes you just want to do the same with
Yeah.
fewer
It works
resources.
well. We want to keep doing that. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so case for support is definitely one of those tools that it serves a myriad of purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned a strategies based approach to like a storytelling and creating this case for support. And, that is like a conversation I'm hearing more and more, right? Especially for organizations that serve underserved
Hmm.
populations, right? Or underrepresented populations. It's kind of like, is it we don't want to tell like a woe is me story, but then, we're afraid that if we don't, then, then we won't get funded. But I think that that is like the solution, right? Like, so the problem is real, right? Because this is a system, and these systems have historically, disenfranchise certain populations, right? And this is what we have done about it. This is the impact of our work. And when you give, the value of your dollar helps support these outcomes, right? So this is how we are fixing this problem, and we have a history of helping to mitigate the problem, not fixing the problem, but helping to mitigate some of these challenges. And I think that's so important for people to understand and realize, right? Like, people don't want to, throw money into what looks like a sinking ship, right? They want to see that there is a solution happening, and that they are investing in the furtherance of that solution. So
I think it's really important in those two to also say like what your beliefs are, right? So you want, we are big dreamers as Chicago Scholars, and I believe that, your zip code should not determine your success. Like, really stating those things that will allow you to, our beliefs the same, and that will carry on the connection between that reader or that listener to even understand, are we a fit for each other? Do I feel like there's a place that I can actually help you make an impact in this space? And so that not just like the problem, what we've done, our results, but like, here's what we believe, here's what we're doing, and here's what we're seeing. Here's the journey that we're on, and then just inviting people into that
come
space.
on to come along the journey. Inviting people to come along the journey. Absolutely. Alicia, this has been really great. So let's, if there's anybody who's listening and who has been compelled to invest in the mission and to go on that journey with you, what are you currently, funding, and how can people support Chicago Scholars if they find that your mission is something that they want to look more into?
Yeah, so it's our 25th anniversary. Yay, fun year. So we've got a lot of things planned. And as I mentioned, this part of our strategic plan is about deepening, it's about innovation and technology, and really finding more efficient ways to deliver the same services, and also starting to the things that we're hearing from our alumni and our scholars in that space of career exploration and career mentoring and internships, all of that stuff. We have 3 key areas that we are focused on fundraising for right now. So there are things that went virtual that will probably stay virtual. So this platform will give us a space for a more efficient delivery for that. I think we'll also be able to connect career partners, those who say they may have a hard time accessing diverse talent. This will be a space and a place for networking, for mentors, career exploration, connecting internships, jobs, all of the such. Also some earned revenue in there to help us with a more sustainable model for our organization. So innovation and technology is one space. Scholar Dollars is another area. Chicago Scholars does provide some financial support. If we have scholarships offered through some of our partners, we also, especially in COVID, we have something called Lifeline, where we help scholars with unforeseen expenses. If that's rent, if it's getting home, if it's an emergency. And we also provide Scholar Dollars for leadership opportunities that might not be paid, and therefore they wouldn't be able to take it. If it's an unpaid internship or an abroad experience, or something of that nature, that's the Scholar Dollars space. And then lastly, internships for all, which is our, what I call we call it our BHAG goal, our big, hairy, audacious goal. We know the importance of internships to that first job out of college, how much you make, where you land, all of those pieces. And so our goal, our vision is to see every scholar graduate with at least one internship. And so we're also fundraising in that space. And if there's anyone who's interested in those things, in mentoring, we're in a mentor recruitment period right now for the mentors that we match with our high school seniors and our college freshmen. All of those things we are our arms are open.
Good to
And
know. I forwarded over to you, the internship piece, but I actually didn't know that that was
yes.
a big part of your mission. And so now I feel like everything that comes across my desk that's intern, I'm gonna be like forwarding it over to you.
I so appreciated that. It was a good, it was good.
Good. Okay. So innovative technology, scholar dollars, and then internships for all. So if you're listening right now and you can help fund or provide resources for either one of those three things, that would be really amazing for a Chicago Scholar. So thanks so much for sharing that. Now, one more question, and then I'm gonna just let you go, or let you share anything else that you want to share, like what red lipstick you're wearing, because it looks so good. It looks so good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
All right, so new potential fundraiser. So you said earlier that you didn't know this was a career when you went to school. I didn't know this was a career when I was in school, and I imagine that there are a lot of people who work in this space now that through happenstance are now fundraisers and doing this work. And as we continue to kind of shout from the rooftops that this is a career path, what would you tell somebody who was thinking about potentially, moving into this career path?
Well,
tell yourself 5 years ago.
hone your listening skills.
Okay, yeah.
Hone your listening skills. If you listen, people will tell you everything you need to know. You will know what they care about. You will know what they don't care about. What's the best approach to connecting them to something or someone. And again, if you listen, you'll become a better storyteller. You become a better storyteller, you become a better dot connector and relationship builder. And so really, really listen to what people are saying and to what they're not saying.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so interesting that you would say that, because, when we prepare people to go in and have these briefing conversations or these solicitation conversations, we're saying say this, and, this is the script for that. And, this is how you're going to convey the messaging, and, this is how you're going to follow up. And I do think that we can be served better by making sure that there are intentional parts of those briefings and preparedness conversations that involve how to listen, right?
Yes.
How to engage in a conversation where you're not just kind of spitting out all the information you want them to know, because that's easy to do. But also, what are the body language, pieces that you might be missing out on because you're thinking about what's next on the script to say to a potential donor. So,
and I've done it, right? I've done it. I've gone in prepared that this is the objective, this is the area, and it's they're talking about. I think they're talking about. They want to hear about internships, and they want to know about mentoring, right? And it's you just gotta, which is again back to why the case for support matters, because you need to know the language, you need to know the program, you need to understand those ins and outs. And so listening, because that will just totally completely land you somewhere you don't want to be if you're not willing to listen to what they're saying.
Absolutely. We do a lot of feasibility studies. And so, there's always kind of the standard questions for a feasibility study in service of a potential campaign, right? So you're do you think this is important? Or do you, who should be your leader, in this mission? And is this something you would like to do, and that type of thing. But, one of the things I always listen for in these conversations is how the person I'm interviewing describes the organization. Do they use pronouns like us, we, our mission? I think we can do this, or are they using words like, I think they can do it. It seems like they can, it seems like they've got some good people who can get that done, right? Because they're either putting themselves in the middle of it and being a part of it in an intimate way, or they are putting themselves outside of it. So it's even listening to, the little nuances of these conversations to try to figure out. Maybe we'll add listening to one of our months here. We might scratch out another one and put how to actively listen. It is important in the work. Okay, so Alicia, this has been so great. I'm super grateful for you and for your being here to share with us. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the folks who might be tuning in and listening to this conversation?
I mean, I think we talked about if you're at all interested in Chicago Scholars as an entire organization, check us out, chicagoscholars.org. If you like to give to the incoming class of 2001, help us reach our goal of $287,000.
I have full faith in you. We're
Visit
already
us
talking
at
about
famu8701.org.
Say it again, because I think I talked over it. Say it again.
It's famu8701.org.
There you go. Okay, got it. All right.
Yeah, but I thoroughly enjoy these conversations. I think I wish that more people, especially our young folks in college or early in their careers, will really consider development as a profession. I think it opens doors to lots of other areas, and you just really learn, I think, wholeheartedly as well about nonprofits and how they run. Even if you are on the fundraising side, really getting an intimate, peel back the layers of how an organization runs. And so I love it. I love development work. I do love Chicago Scholars. I love my HBCUs. I'm here for it. So
Awesome. Well, Alicia, thank you so much for being here again. And to the folks listening, thank you so much for tuning in to this conversation with Alicia Rankin of Chicago Scholars and FAMU and all of the other wonderful hats that she wears. Thanks for tuning in. And of course, you want to like this video if you liked it and follow TJ Marie Consulting. And yeah. That's it. Thanks again and have a wonderful day. Thanks for tuning in to Breakfast at Tiffany's. Bye. Bye.